Welcome, everybody. I'm Nancy Bronstein, and I'm so glad that you've decided to join me today. I am a Viking educator, and today we're going to be talking about the circular attachment. And that's this gizmo here. Looks pretty simple. Oh, I forgot to put the camera on me. I'm off to a great start. The people helping me are telling me, we can't see your face, we can't see your face. So here we go again. I'm Nancy Bronstein, and you think that I haven't done a Facebook Live before, but I really have. And what we're going to be talking about today is the circular attachment. And it is a relatively simple looking device, but so much fun, so many things you can do with it. So since it's called a circular attachment, the first thing you would probably think that it would do is to make circles. So we're going to start off simple and then build from there. So the circular attachment, first of all, you should know that there's two versions of it, depending upon the type of machine that you have. And online on the Husqvarna Viking website, there is an accessory finder that you can look up online which circular attachment to get for your machine, or you can download the whole accessory catalog, which is what I would recommend if you don't have it. And sometimes dealers will have them available as well. They're a tremendous resource. And I think it's on page 5. Yes, on page 5, it lists all the different machines and what number designation they have. They basically have divided all the machines into different numbers. For instance, the brand new top of the line, the Epic 2, is a 9, and your let's see, Designer Ruby, the original Designer Ruby, is a 7. So you look up your machine, you find the number that it is, and then that will let you know which circular attachment you should purchase. But the circular attachment is available for just about every Viking machine that's been made in many, many years. So it probably will fit your machine, but you have to make sure you get the right one. So to start out, I'm going to change my camera here so you can see my Epic 2. And the way that you begin to work with the circular attachment is there are these right angle pieces of metal on the circular attachment, and they fit into the holes on your stitch plate. And that's why there are two different types of circular attachments, because they have to fit into the holes where they are on your machine. So you just press them in there, and that holds them pretty securely. Then to the left, there is this slider. And if you want to make a bigger circle, you're going to go out, and a smaller circle, you're going to go in. And then you have a push pin that will hold your fabric in place on this slider. Now, when you're using this, if you are making very small circles, do not use your automatic threader if you have one. If you have the Designer Epic or the new Designer Ruby 90 or the Designer Epic 2, because what will happen once this comes down to thread your needle, it will hit the top of the pin, and I'm sure that's not good for the threader, and it won't thread your needle. If you're way out here, you're fine, but just remember, if you are up there, to thread by the old-fashioned way. Now, the other thing that I would recommend is that when you're using the circular attachment, they say you should not use your automatic cutter because of this piece of metal that goes into your stitch plate. So I'm always on automatic. So what I do, and I'll always use the threader, and the light is not great here, so you're not going to see it, but now I'm going to have to focus. What I do is I put a piece of painter's tape over my cutter on my machine, because otherwise I automatically hit that cutter, hit that cutter, hit that cutter. So when I put my circular attachment on, I put the painter's tape over my cutter button, and that keeps me from hitting it just as a reflex. Okay, so let's get started here. Now, we're going to do a straight stitch and just make a simple circle. So I'm just going to go into sewing mode. and choose a straight stitch. Okay, we're good. And if I want this circle to be right in the center of my fabric, then I'll just put my push pin in the center, like so. And then I can take this pin out and stick it under here and put the pin into my slider. Okay, I have a question. Can this work on the SE? Pretty sure it can work on the SE. Let's see. Let's see if it's listed in here. Yeah, I'll look it up. If it's not, I'm almost positive. I'll look it up when we're all done. And if it's not, I will reply to this question, but I am like 99% sure it will work on the SE. So just, I'm going to forge ahead here, and then I'll come back to that after the hour is up and make sure in the catalog that is true. But I'm pretty sure. Okay, so going back to our circle here. So one of the first things I would do at this point, once I have my fabric secured, is I would just do a test circle to make sure the diameter of the circle is not going to be okay on one side and it's going to go over on the other. So this is a quick, easy way to see, yeah, that's going to work. The other thing that I would suggest is that even though I'm going to use a straight stitch, I have a piece of stabilizer underneath because it just makes things move more smoothly. And I'm most times going to use a decorative stitch at some point anyway, so I might as well put the stabilizer in there right away. Okay, so I'm going to just make it a little bit smaller. And then I'm just going to start stitching. And as I'm stitching, I'm kind of petting the fabric a bit, because what I want to do is I don't want to impede the motion, but I don't want it to bubble up. So I'm just encouraging it to lay flat, basically, very lightly. And of course, I wanted to just hit that cutter just now, but I have it covered, so I didn't. So now I'm going to pull the thread out and pull this out. And another thing I would suggest is that when you pull your pin out, you take your fabric away, put the pin into the circular attachment right away, because what will happen if you don't is you'll take your eye off that. It'll jump off your table underneath your desk, and you have to get down on all fours to find it, and you're not happy. And that's happened to me, I don't know, 100 times. So I got a message from Meredith, who is one of the staff people assisting me today. Yes, the circular attachment does work for the Designer SC, and she will share the part number with you. So like I said, I was pretty sure. So I'm just going to cut my thread ends here. So now I have this nice circle. Well, what do I do with it? My plan is to make an applique. So the next thing I would do is I would cut very, very close to this thread without cutting the thread, hopefully. And I have pre-made one, so you don't have to sit and watch me cut. So now I have this. Now at this point, I can use the circular attachment to do any decorative stitch that floats my boat to stitch around here to cover up the raw edge. Typically, I'd probably use a satin stitch. So I need to get a piece of stabilizer here to put underneath. And I have my original hole right there where my thumbtack was. You might not be able to see it on camera, but I can see it pretty clearly. And I'm going to put my thumbtack right in there, and I'm going to keep my slider in the same spot. Because if I move it, my circle is going to be different. And I want to go right over where I stitched before. And my thread's gotten a little wacky. So I put this back in here. And I must have moved. Oh, I know, this is not the same size as the one that I made before. But you're going to check when you go to do this, you want to make sure the red line on your foot is on the area that you've cut away. And now I'm going to go in and find a satin stitch. So I'll change to my other Meredith, can you adjust the focus? Sure, I can adjust the focus. I must have bumped it. Fortunately, this thing does not automatically adjust the focus. So hopefully that's better. So now I'm going to go to my screen on my Epic 2, and I'm going to go to category B and pick a satin stitch, number 11. And so since I have the satin stitch, I know that it's going to go, basically it's going to cover up the edge of this fabric, the raw edge of the fabric. And then I'm just going to start stitching. And I should have put on the B foot, which I did not do, but I'm not going to do at this point because I've already started stitching. The reason why it asked for the B foot, just so you know, the B foot okay, where did you go, B foot? The B foot is very much like the A foot, but it has a groove on the underside. The B foot is very much like the A foot, except that it has a groove on the underside, so that when it's going across those raised satin stitches, there's no drag on the satin stitches. So I'm not going to sew this whole thing. I'm just demoing a small part. So I'm going to leave my A foot on, but I really should have put the B foot on. So I'm going to encourage it to move a little bit so it doesn't get hung up if it feels like it is getting hung up. And what you're looking for, again, you don't want this to bunch up. You want to stay smooth. And it's generally not a good idea to encourage this too much. You want to, if you tug on this, your stitches are going to be uneven, but I'm putting sort of a regular pressure on there, so I'm getting away with it. So you can see how that's going to create a nice finished edge on the circle, where we will end up with something that looks like this. So now I have this nice finished edge applique. Now, some people like to have a more sort of refined applique, I guess you could say, where it's a turned edge, and then they will do some sort of either blanket stitch or something where the stitch is not quite this, doesn't stand out quite as much, it fades into the background more. So what you could do if you prefer to do that kind of applique, I'll show you. Let's see. I think I might have another question here. Let's see. Question is it possible to use decorative stitches with the circle attachment? Yes. We're going to get there. We're starting out with straight stitch, and then you'll see that there's all sorts of decorative stitches you can use. That's really one of the things that's a lot of fun with it. And what are you using as stabilizer? Well, the stabilizer would depend on the fabric you're doing this with and the purpose of what kind of item that you're creating. Like if it's a garment that it's not going to be lined and you're going to feel the backside, I might use a different stabilizer than if it's a wall hanging. So as far as stabilizer, I would go with what you would normally use for decorative stitches for that particular item and that particular stitch. So just go by that. Don't worry about it being the circular attachment being part of the equation. It's basically, how you normally choose stabilizer would be the purpose, the fabric, the stitch. And it would be the same with the circular attachment and without it. Okay, so we'll go back to our needle. And to do a rolled edge applique, okay, and I didn't put my push pin into my slider, and of course it jumped onto the floor. Okay, so let's find my example for the next step. I've got it here. Bear with me a minute. I've got lots of stuff that I want to show you. Okay, so if I were going to want to do a applique circle that I'm going to place on my fabric, and I wanted a rolled edge, and I'm going to either stitch that down by hand, or I'm going to use like a very tiny blanket stitch, something like that. What I could do with the circular attachment is I can make these nice circles. I can make a bunch of them very quickly. And what I would suggest you do is you take your fabric and you get a piece of fusible interfacing, not stabilizer. And you put the interfacing so the bumpy side, the adhesive side, is against the right side of your fabric. So I actually have this on here, the reverse of what I want. So I've got the bumpy adhesive side against the right side of my fabric. Then I'm going to put it into my circular attachment and make my circle. And again, I would do a quick circle, and it looks like this circle is a little too big, so I'm going to make it a bit smaller so that I don't run off the blue fabric. And I got to go back to my straight stitch. Then I'd make my circle. And you'll see that it's bunching up a little bit because I don't have stabilizer under there. So with the interfacing, it is a little bit trickier, and you need to go a little bit slower. And it's also harder because it's such a small circle. Okay, so we got our circle made. Then what I would do is I would take it out and I would cut all the way around, and then cut some, make some cuts on the curve all the way around, and make a slit in the back. Then I'm going to turn this right side out. So what will happen is we've got the right side of the fabric on the outside and the fusible part of the interfacing on the back side. Just give me a minute to get this all turned right sides out. Then you poke around the border to get your circle back. I've got my finger in the hole so I can push out the circle. Then when you iron this down, it'll be nice and flat and round, and it will stick to your fabric because the adhesive part of the interfacing is on this back side. So when you iron it down, it'll be stuck to your fabric, and then you can use whatever stitch it is that you want to do. Now, you could certainly put this back into the circular attachment and do the blanket stitch. If you do needle turned machine applique, you could do that and do whatever stitch it is that you like to use with your needle turn. So it gives you a nice finished edge, and you can make circles of whatever, a variety of sizes because of the slider on the circular attachment. Okay, so I have a question. Specifically, what stabilizer are you using? This here is interfacing, fusible interfacing, but the other stabilizer that I'm using is tearaway. It's Inspira tearaway. Oh, what you were seeing before with newsprint, that's the fabric. I have this fabric that looks like newsprint. That's not the stabilizer. So that's just the print on the fabric. I happen to like the way this newsprint looks with red and black, and the contrast makes it easy to see on the camera. So I thought that combo would be good for demoing this. Okay, so let's go back to using decorative stitches on our piece that we made before. Let me get that out. So we have this piece that I made with the satin stitch all the way around. And I'm going to put that back in, and we're going to do some decorative stitches. I have a question. Can you use the attachment with the interchangeable dual feed system? Yes, you can use it. It doesn't get in the way. Some people prefer not to use it. Some people do prefer to use it. It's a personal preference thing, but it's perfectly fine to use it. Except that if you're using a decorative stitch, it may call for the B foot, which is not a foot that has a cutout in the back for the IDF, for the walking foot. Okay, so we are now going to do a decorative stitch here on this piece. So I'm going to go into my settings here on the machine. Whoops, wrong one. That's the one I want. So I kind of am partial to leaves and flowers, but when we go over to the flower area, they are generally a flower or a leaf. So I'm going to go into programming and program a stitch so that I have a leaf, flower, leaf, flower. So down here's programming. And I'm going to go back to my D menu where I have flowers and leaves. And let's see, let's pick, say this, and see how that, I don't like the way that looks. Let's pick another one. And let's go back up, pick a different flower to go in there. And I'm going to turn that way. Okay, so we've got two leaves and then a flower. When I'm happy with the program I created, I'm going to touch the check mark. And now I'm going to find the center of my circle again and put the push pin in there. And get that back into my slider. And that probably is a good spot to put a ring of some decorative stitches. So I'm going to put my needle down and, oops, I'm going to put my B foot on this time. I'm going to remember to put that on. So because the B foot doesn't have the cutout in the back, we're not even going to think about putting down the walking foot. But I'm going to put my needle down and I'm going to start stitching. Now, the tricky part about using a decorative stitch like this that is not really small and repetitive is that when you come to, you're getting close to the circle meeting, You're going to have to kind of eyeball it, and then you may want to make that last stitch either longer or shorter to kind of fill the gap that's there. So I'm going to stitch a little bit more, and then I'm going to eyeball it. And it looks like this flower needs to be shorter, so I'm going to make it a shorter stitch, and I'll show you what I did. On here, the default was 50, it was 55 millimeters long. That's all the 2 leaves and the flower together. But I'm going to make it shorter to hopefully have it fit into this spot here. And then I'm watching it here. Not too bad. Then I'm going to hit the fix button, fix it, not hit the scissors, bring the foot up, and not too shabby, matching it up. So let me pull this out so you can see it. Put the push pin back right away. Cut these ends. I think if you didn't know that I had joined it there, you wouldn't realize that that was, you know, the join. So it's just a matter of practice with that. If you're doing a small repetitive geometric stitch, it's not that big a deal. If you want perfection with this type of thing, then you would want to go into design shaping and embroidery. You know, embroidery, you'll get perfection. With the circular attachment, the thing that I really like about it is you can just do things on the fly. You know, like you're almost done with the project and you feel like you want to add this circular design and you don't want to overthink it. You just put it in the circular attachment and stitch it down. Or you can, and I'll show you a little bit later, I have a wall hanging that I call Improv Circle Play that was just playing around with the circular attachment. So you can get to the point where I think this looks pretty good. Let's see, it's not looking too good on the camera. Yeah, you can't see it there. Let's go back here. So it matches up pretty darn well. And you're going to have to take my word for it because I can't get the camera to focus in too closely. So that would be doing a somewhat large decorative stitch. But if you were doing a smaller one, it'd be easier. And you don't have to confine yourself to the A foot or the B foot. I'm going to show you how you can add a decorative element with other decorative feet, which is a lot of fun. So I have here a 7-hole cording foot. And the 7-hole cording foot has 7 tiny holes on it up here where you can thread. You can use embroidery floss. You can use 8-pearl cotton. I'm using the decorative thread that we have for the specialty bobbin case. So it's thicker. It's probably like a 10 weight maybe, or an 8 weight thread. We have this 7-hole foot. Let's see if I can, I don't think I can probably show it real well on the camera, but because I've already threaded it to save time, but it has 7 holes in it. Then we also have a 3-hole yarn foot, which you can do similar things with. Now the 3-hole yarn foot obviously has less holes and they are larger. So this will accommodate yarn better for doing decorative stitches. It also will accommodate satin cording. Like, I think I have some up here that I could grab. Yeah. So it will even accommodate something like this. So you can do a decorative stitch with yarn or with the cording. I wouldn't, personally, I would not use this for floss because you're going to see gaps between the threads, unless you want something where you see gaps. Because these holes are much smaller and closer together, you don't see the gaps. So I think this is better for more decorative threads than the other one. It's nice to have both. So I'm going to show you how to use this. Now we have another question. Do you have the walking foot up? I had the walking foot up on the decorative stitch because we had the B foot on, which was recommended by the Epic 2 to do the decorative stitch. So it doesn't want you to use the walking foot. So did you cut the circle first, or did you fussy cut the circle after the straight stitch? What I did was, I have an example here, just like I think I showed this. I put my piece of red, I have red fabric, then I have my back newsprint fabric and a piece of stabilizer, and I put that in the circular attachment, put the push pin in the middle, and then I did a straight stitch circle. You can just kind of see it on the camera. Maybe I can see it better here. You can see the straight stitch that I did. Then I cut out very close to the stitching here on this one. So I cut very, very close. And then I did the satin stitch around the edge. So the straight stitch and the satin stitch were done with the circular attachment. And then once I did the satin stitch all the way around, I had, this nice applique that was finished, and then I added the decorative stitches. I have another question. Are those feet you're showing made for the 9mm wide stitches or just the 7? They are made, the foot currently is, I believe, 7mm. There may be a new one available for the 9mm, but I don't know for sure. That's something I'll have to look up. Most of your stitches that are utilizing the yarn and the decorative thread are less than 9mm. So you can get away with using your feet from previous machines if you do have it that is a 7mm with the Epic 2. Or you can change the width of the stitch and make it more narrow. Okay, I have another question. I have had this attachment for my Topaz 50 for about 3 years. I have the Epic now. I got it from a demonstration at an open house quilt sewing machine shop. I tried to use it to quilt through the typical front batting and back fabrics. It didn't work. Well, first of all, the circular attachment for the Topaz is not the right one for the Epic. Like as I said in the beginning, there's 2 different ones, and the Epic and the Epic 2 and the Designer Ruby 90 have a different stitch plate, and they have a different circular attachment. Now, the other problem that you might be having is, as you probably noticed, when you are, let me put this back in to explain this. When you're working with the circular attachment, it has to be able to freely rotate. If the quilt is hitting up against something, it's going to throw off your stitch. And also, something I should have mentioned from the very beginning, and I forgot, is that it is really helpful with the circular attachment to either have an extension table or have your embroidery arm on. Because if you look at this, take this off, this is sticking way out. And you don't want it hanging off in space. It will be unstable. So you want to have it on an extension table or on your embroidery arm. Then going through a quilt sandwich, if you have, say you're doing quilt as you go and you have a small quilt sandwich, it's going to take a bit more skill to keep everything going smoothly than with just a piece of cotton and stabilizer. So it probably will take practice to get it so that it works the way you want it to work, but it can be done. It's just a matter, it's a little trickier because anything that creates drag is going to throw off the stitches a bit. They won't be as even. Okay, so, we're going to go to decorative stitching now. So let's go back to here. So as I was saying before, I have my 7-hole cording foot with some decorative thread in it. And the way that I thread these things, first of all, they do come with a threader, but this thread is thin enough that I didn't really feel like I needed it, but it does come with a threader. And what I do is from the very first, I put a knot in the back, because otherwise it's going to slip right out of the holes. There'll be one or two that misbehave, and it'll drive you crazy if you don't put a knot. And I think the directions may say for you to put the thread from the front to the back. I go from the back to the front and pull it through. Now, when we're doing this, say on some other project, I always tell students that they have to pull the knot away to not sew on it, but we need to pull out even more actually, because with this circle, you're going to go all the way around with this stitch. And when you get to where you first started, you're going to want to be able to bury these threads. So you want it long enough to start out with so that you can bury these threads so you get a nice end result. You're going to thread each of these and pull them to the back of your fabric. So I'm going to take this foot off. I'm going to pull my decorative threads back. And I didn't put my pin back, but it didn't jump off the table, luckily. So I'm going to put my push pin right back in the middle where my previous hole was. And put that push pin right in my slider. Now this time I'm going to go outside of my circle to kind of make a halo around it. And I'll show you where there's specialty stitches in the machine for this foot. So if you go all the way to and a lot of the Vikings do have these stitches. You go to the P menu on the Epic or the Epic 2 or the Ruby 90, and we have all these specialty stitches. These are stitches designed for our different specialty feet. And the stitches that look like they kind of have yarn behind the stitch itself, those are for the 3-hole yarn foot and the 7-hole cording foot. So I am going to choose this stitch. And you'll see now it has a question mark because it's wanting one of these specialty feet. And that is a 9mm stitch. So I'm going to take it down to 7. And that's how you would do that. So now going back to my camera on the needle, I'm just going to put my needle down and start stitching. I just want to keep this flat here. It's not bubbling up. It's feeding smoothly. And I'm not going to go all the way around. You'll see how nice that looks. It's like a really nice accent. And I'll show you one that I did previously, did 2 rings. And this is different stitches, different specialty stitches and different threads. This is more of a matte finish pearl cotton. I think it's a 10 or an 8. And then this is the specialty bobbin case threads that have the metallic in them. So what I will do at the end is I'm going to have to thread each of these and pull it to the back and knot it. Now, again, with this stitch, when you get towards the two are gonna meet, you have to kind of visualize it and see, do you need to make that stitch a little shorter? And so it's an experience thing that you'll get to where you can match it up pretty well, and you'll have this nice circle effect. Now, another thing that I like to do, and I'll show you a sample, is see if there's any other questions. What type of needle are you using? I'm just using a universal 90. So on this holiday banner, I used our ribbon attachment to make the Jewish star. And on the inside, I used the circular attachment to put in beads with the beading foot. And then I went back later and added some other beads. But most of it was done in embroidery, except for the beads. The beads were added after the embroidery to give it some more dimensionality, I guess you would say. And I added the kind of framing element with ribbon. So I'm going to show you how you can make a circle with beads. So we have, Viking has two different types of beading feet, and one is for smaller beads and one is for a little bit larger. I think it's something like two and 3, and then maybe 4 millimeter beads, something like that. But they come in two different sizes: the mini beading foot and then the regular beading foot. And it's nice to have both if you like to add beads to things. So I got to get this set up here, put that aside. So I'm going to use this bead string that is I think it's a 3 millimeter, and they come in a spool. You can order them online from Amazon, like where we get everything these days, unfortunately. And if your local store has one, you should really buy it at the local store. But this is sort of a specialty item, and you probably would need to go, to somewhere online. And I buy them by the spool. You can get some that look like pearls, and these are really nice. These actually, the pearl ones, look really nice, I think, using gold metallic thread when you stitch them down. And I'll show you what that looks like before I start doing the demo. I love the pearl beads with gold thread. So I don't know if you can see this really well, but when I did this one, I actually did more than one loop in between because I wanted the gold to stand out. If I bring it up to the camera, it's going to be kind of in the dark, unfortunately. I'm going to try to get the best shot of that I can get. But it looks really pretty with the gold, I think, in between the pearl beads, faux pearl beads. So I'm going to show you how you do that. I got to get my beading foot on. So the beading foot has a big tunnel on underside so that the beads will feed through there. And, I was going to show you this too. So this is another design that I did with just decorative stitches. So when you're doing a stitch like this, it's very easy to match it up because they're so repetitive and small. And this one, when I came to where it had to be joined, which I can't even see where it is now, I did reduce the length of the stitch a bit. And the same thing for this. But you can see how it turned out pretty well. And you can't really see, I don't even remember where I joined it now. Down here, it's a little glitchy because I didn't realize the stabilizer had shifted on me, so it got kind of bunchy. So I kept this as a sample to show you that if you don't have stabilizer in there, it's not going to look as good. It's not going to be as flat and nice as up here. You may not be able to see that on the camera, but in person, you would see that it's a little bit bunchy there because the stabilizer wasn't there to stabilize. So now we're going to add some beads to something. Let's find something we can do this on. Okay, we'll use this original circle. Now with beads, there's a step that you want to do first. Like the using the specialty thread, you want to think ahead to how you're going to bury the beginning, because you don't want like just a bead sort of sticking up, because if you just cut at the last bead, it's going to poke up a little bit. You want it to have a cord on the end that you pull to the back side and not so that it finishes it off. So now we have a question. What type of needle I asked that. I answered that one. Could a double needle be used for any of these stitches? It could be used for the stitches. I have not tried a twin needle with the circular attachment. I mean, I have used a twin needle for a lot of things. I've even used it with the Echo quilting foot to Echo quilt with a decorative stitch with the twin needle, but I have not used it with the circular attachment. So you'd have to give that a try and let me know. I think in theory, if you went really slow, it shouldn't be a problem. The thing with twin needles I find is if you rush it a bit, you're going to break a needle. It's easier, or maybe that's just me. It's just, I find it easy. If I'm rushing with a twin needle, I'm probably going to break it. Okay, so is that the 2 millimeter, 2 to 3 millimeter? This is not the mini bead foot. This is the regular bead foot that I'm using. Okay, so, I was saying to start. So you've got this string of beads, get it on the camera, that doesn't show up very well. Maybe I could go over here. So you have this string of beads, and we want a string at the end so that we can thread it into a needle and pull it to the back to secure the beginning and the end of the circle. So what I do is I have some needle nose pliers or some other jewelry pliers, and you can basically smash these beads and just pull them off the string. Can't see if I can do this on camera. So I just take the pliers and squish them, and it kind of flies all over the place if you don't have it down in the garbage can. They're not hard to break. I'm just going to do a little bit and show you what it looks like. So then you end up with a string on the end that you can thread into. I would definitely make it longer than that so that I can thread it into a needle and pull it to the back. And I'm going to do that with both the beginning of the circle and at the end so that I have a nice finished edge. So you can probably see the thread sticking out now. So this is the part I would make it probably about that long so that I can get into a needle, thread it to the back and knot it. But I'm not going to do that with this. So, but just so you know, you do it at the beginning and the end. So I'm going to put this in here into my slider. Now I had previously done this, used this as a demo just to show you making a circle. I wouldn't have to do that for this technique. I could do this on a plain piece of fabric, but since it's there, I'm going to use it for the beads. So the stitch that I would use is I would go in and get a blanket stitch. Something like this. This is B4. Now, you need to adjust the width and the length. Since I believe these are 3 millimeter beads, I'd put this at 3 and this at 3. Now, before I did anything on my project with a new size bead, I would test the stitch and make sure that it is indeed the stitch the sizes that I want, the length and the width that I want, if it's a bead that I haven't previously sewn. So I'm going to stick this under here, put my foot down, and before I do any press on the foot pedal, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the flywheel to see where this is hitting, because I want it to hit in between the beads. When it takes that, a blanket stitch, what it's going to do is it's going to, let me get a pen here. blanket stitch is going to come and then it's going to bite in, and it's going to come down and it's going to bite in. And what you want is you want the bead to be here and here. And when it bites in, you want the bead to be there. So by doing the flywheel, you can see if your settings are good, and if they're not, adjust them accordingly. And you're probably not going to be able to see this on the camera, but that's what I'm doing. Okay, so now I'm going to go really slow. Now, if when you're doing this, what did I do with my pen? If when you're doing it and it's going between the beads, you see that? Yeah. When it goes, you have a bead here and a bead here. If it takes an extra bite this way, it's fine. And with the metallic thread with the gold beads, I actually was I was holding the strand of beads, so it went through here 3 times because I really wanted the gold to stick out. So it, as long as it's sewn down with 1 bite, it's good. 2 bites is better. 3 only if you want it to really stand out. I'm going to do a little bit more and then I'll show you what it looks like. I'm not going to do the whole circle. Okay, that's good enough. Okay, so we have our beads sewn down, very pretty. And I have one already done over here to talk about. So I did this, I went all the way around and I have these long strings on the end. So what I'll do is I will thread it into a big hole needle and pull that to the back. Those 2 threads will come out here and I'll tie them in a knot together. So then you'll have a finished end on here. I probably should break off that last bead. It looks a little crowded. And I can still do that with my needle nose pliers. Oops, it's right off, it's kind of off the camera. But you can see how I went right up to the edge there. I'll pull those 2 threads back and tie them in a knot so everything's nice and secure. And then you get a nice end product. Okay, let's see what else. Oh, I'm almost at the end of my time. Oh, geez. Was the circular attachment used for the piece to the left of the Jewish star? To the left of the Jewish star. This piece is kind of a squiggly. That's an embroidery. So the circular attachment was only used for the beaded circle. Okay, and see if there's another question. I'm being asked to remind you that at the end there will be a survey, and we would really like you to fill it out because that will give us input about how to move forward to meet your needs so that we will do subjects that you're interested in. And also to let you know that the next Facebook Live will be with me on February 2nd. And that will be actually something new and different. I am going to be doing a class on our sit-down long arm on location at a quilting store in Franklin, Massachusetts. So that should be interesting. It's going to be a new experience for me. I mean, I've taught in quilting stores many times, but not done a Facebook Live there. See, another question. How do you make it take more bites on a blanket stitch? Well, with the beads, I just hold the bead strand a little tight and it will not advance. So that's how I would make it happen. Can you show the orange? Oh, yeah, the orange thing is really what I wanted to get to. And I'm running out of time. And the other thing I wanted to show you was that with the circular attachment, there are instructions in the box to do this next technique. And there are templates, but you can make stars. So you, let me put it under the other camera. So you can make all these different stars using the circular attachment. So you can make, cut this thread here. You can make 8 petal flowers or stars. I guess they're flowers. Let's get rid of this stuff here that's getting in the way. So there are instructions, like I said, in a template in the box. So you can make all these different flower shapes with the circular attachment. This is going to be a pillow eventually. And that's what I was going to show next. However, we are running out of time, but I might be able to show you a little bit of that. But here is my Improv circular table runner, or Improv circle play table runner. So you'll see that I made a big circle here. So this was all orange. Then after I did the applique, the satin stitch on the outside to make it one big orange applique, I did another circle of satin stitch and then cut away the orange fabric so it revealed the red fabric behind to make a reverse applique. And then I made this little applique here and then added another applique on top. All this is done with the circular attachment. And then I did all these circles of, you can't see it very well, but there's all these circles of decorative stitches, all the decorative stitches that you may never use on your machine. And then did a circle on a couple circles on the outside. Then on this part up here, I just played with putting one circle on top of another and adding decorative stitches and circles on the inside. And so it was just so much fun to play with it, to just like, oh, I like that stitch. Why don't I try that one? And if you're playing around and the stitch gets a little bit wonky, put a circle applique on top of it on the wonky part, and then use the part that looks good. Who's going to know? And I think on this one down here was not so good. So I cut it off and made it a smaller panel. Then down at the very bottom, this is a different technique. The little circle appliques are done with the circular attachment. The other pieces where I put steam on the outside of the fabric and cut these kind of circular sliver pieces and then just blanket stitched around them. So just to play on, circle play is the whole thing. Then to top it off, I'm going to show you over here, just to plug the 3-hole yarn foot. I framed it with some pretty thick thread, decorative thread, with the 3-hole yarn foot, and you'll see how you see a gap in between. But I think it added a nice decorative element to the border of the quilt going all the way around. And of course, for this technique with that foot, because I knew I was coming off the edge, I didn't have to worry about burying the ends of the decorative thread because they were in the binding. So it's really a lot of fun to play with the circular attachment because you can just kind of try different things, and like I said, if it doesn't turn out, put a circular applique over the part that's wonky. So before we sign off, I want to quickly show you how you do a flower with this. So I've got to clean up my mess here a bit to clear the area where I want to demo this. Just bear with me. Okay, I've got a question. Will the directions for the orange sample be available? I just was winging it the whole way. I'm just putting I'll actually show you what I did. I've got a piece of paper here somewhere. So the first thing in making that table runner, I decided that I wanted it to have 3 panels. And at first they were going to be equal size. And then I took each block out and thought, well, what could I do with this? I could make a big circle And then I could make it a reverse applique, and then maybe throw an applique on top of that, and then do some decorative stitches around. And then maybe the next one, I could do circle, circle. You know, I just was ad-libbing the whole way. You know, I just made some drawings that looked like it would be something that would look good together, and then started playing with the circular attachment. And like I said, one of the circles was a little wonky on one side, so I made that square a little bit smaller, that block, or I put another circle on the side of it because it's offset, you know, a smaller circle. So just play with it. And I don't have instructions, in other words. So, but it's just an example of things that you can do. But I do want to show you how to make flowers. So to make flowers, like I said, there's a 4-petal template, and there's a 8-petal template, and you can make a 6-petal. And then there's also a template that can help you make a circle if you really want to mark it, as opposed to the way I did it, where I just started sewing. So to use the 6-petal template, you can make a flower as big as this here. You know, this is half of it. You know, you can, if you go out to the very ends, it'll be very large. If you use the holes closer to the middle, it'll be smaller. So in order to, this camera is backwards of the way that I think I should pull this. Okay, so I put my template over the fabric. And if I wanted to make a 10-millimeter flower, I would put a dot in each hole that has a 10 next to it. Although I don't know if this is actually millimeters. It's just some form of measurement. If you want a flower about that big, use the same number hole all the way around. So that's half of the flower. Then you're going to turn the template over and line up your holes with the 10 here, the 10 here, and the 0 there, and make another marking on the 10 on this side. So I started here, then I just turned it over and did it on this side. So now I've got, looks like I've got an extra dot there for some reason. Yep, don't look at this dot. That was a mistake. So I've got the dots all the way around and a dot in the middle. Then I bring it over to the Epic 2. Now, as I was marking that, I hope that you saw what I was doing because I wasn't watching on the screen. But now I have this piece of fabric with all the dots on it that I need to make my flower. I'm going to put a piece of stabilizer behind to change my foot. I'm going to be using a straight stitch just to keep things simple, but you could use like a smaller decorative stitch if you wanted. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my push pin and I'm going to put it, I'm going to first put it in one dot, then I'm going to move all the way around the perimeter, all the dots. So I'm going to put it in that dot first and put it into my into my slider. And then I have to make sure that when I spin this, that the needle is going to fall on my center. And it's a little bit off. So I'm going to move this over. So that looks good. So now what I need to do is I need to make a semicircle like this. And then when I move the push pin over to here, I'm going to be making a semicircle like that. And I move the push pin over to here, and I'm going to be making a semicircle like that. And I'm going to keep going around until I basically have a flower like that. But looks a lot nicer than that. So I'll show you what I mean. So I start at my dot there. I put my needle down there, and I just start sewing. And it sounds like something's going on with the bobbin, but hopefully it's going to resolve itself. Yep. Okay. Now, if this were an actual project, I would have fixed the end, but we're on borrowed time here, so I'm just going to do this quickly so you can see how we end up with the flower. So I did the push pin in one hole, or on one dot. Then I'm going to move it over to the next dot, put my push pin in there, in the slider, get my fabric under here. And now I'm going to do a like a semicircle there, starting at my next dot up here. And I need to start cutting these ends here because they're making me a little crazy. Then I move my push pin to the next dot. Put that in the slider. And it meets up to that dot where I started. Then I move my push pin over to the next dot. And drop my needle at the next dot next to that. And you can see how if I keep going, I'm going to have this really nice flower because it's going to finish it off. And, you know, if you wanted to, you could use a small decorative stitch instead of the straight stitch. And what I would suggest that until you get, you know, really, really comfortable with this, I would do the straight stitch first and then do the decorative stitch over it. Because if you mess up, the straight stitch is a lot easier to pull out. So it's very easy to do the decorative stitch over the straight stitch. So let's see, we have one last, Meredith wants me to once again mention the survey. There will be a link in the caption of the comments, and we'd really like you to fill that out, and that will benefit you because it will help us to create programs that you are looking forward to. So again, thank you so much for joining me today. As you can tell, I really like the circular attachment. It's a lot of fun to play with, particularly if you don't have an embroidery machine. You got to get a circular attachment because there's so much you can do with it. So get one, have fun. And let's see, one more question. Can you do the whole flower without cutting thread by leaving needle in place and just switch the thumbtack to the next hole? That's a good, okay. So you leave your needle in place. What you would have to do, like the next thing I would do is I would need to have the thumbtack here. And I've sewn all the way down. Whoops. The next place that I would place this, I would be putting the thumbtack here. And my needle I just did this, and my thread is all the way over here. So I don't know how you would do it without cutting your thread, because what I need to do is I need to jump to another petal. So not quite sure if that answers your question, but if you figure it out, I would like to know. But basically you're doing a semicircle, and then, I see what you're saying. You want to go like this and like that. Probably if you planned ahead, you could. That's pretty smart. And I obviously wasn't that smart, but I see where you're going with that. So yeah, you could do that. You just have to plan ahead so that when you did this, then you'd have to have the needle you put the thumbtack in the right hole that would create, you'd have to put it over here. So it would create this part. So you'd go like this and like that. And then you'd need to have the thumbtack in the hole that would create that arc. Then if you hadn't done this arc yet, you'd have to put the thumbtack in the hole that would create that arc. That's smart. Obviously, I wasn't that smart, but I'm glad you asked that question, because that's the way I'm going to do it from now on. So thank you. So again, thank you very much. Happy sewing. It was so good to be with you today. And I hope you all, if you have a circular attachment that you haven't used, pull that baby out right now and start sewing with it. So again, thank you. Bye-bye.